go beyond the headlines and into the real stories shaping our world.
Why pay more than $200 million to have 1,000 Kenyan soldiers come to Haiti when we could use that money to train the police?
What you've done with your grief is actually to spread it and give it and turn it into the love.
This served Netanyahu because he didn't think Hamas would ever be a serious military threat.
Congo is a country with so much wealth. The people have been fighting to regain control.
From the corridors of power to the front lines of change, Borderline brings you in with analysis of the issues.
The U.S. has power over them. Most of them will steal money from Haiti and invest in the U.S.
Some people who support Sonko and Jumai 5, over half of them don't have a voter's card.
Sounds like Nigeria.
Join Ireti Bakare-Yusuf on Borderlines as she engages with policymakers and thought leaders,
giving you perspectives and insights you won't find anywhere else.
Be part of the conversation. Join us live.
Your voice matters on Borderlines as we explore the complexities.
Every Friday at 4 p.m.
on 99.3 Nigeria Info.
Stay informed, stay engaged.
Step into the conversation.
And welcome to Borderlines, Lagos, Nigeria. Wherever you're joining us from, the abroad, those of you that joined from Israel and all over the world. My name is Ireti Bakare-Yusuf. Right, we have a wonderful show for you today because I have a most important guest that will take us on a journey that we've skirted around it. We've talked to historians, Jewish historians, non-Jewish historians. We've had several conversations. We've spoken to Michael, my friend, my buddy Michael, the ambassador, the Israeli ambassador to Nigeria. And we've had the the Palestinian ambassador to Nigeria also here. But what we haven't had is what I would call, perhaps best to say, if I say a flag carrying Israeli, Jewish Israeli, who is the proud director of what is called the Jewish Project, and he will tell us about that. His name is Ezra Ridgley. Let me just read a short part of his profile to you, so as to give you context for when the conversation begins. Ezra was born in Toronto, but now lives in the hills of Judea, south of Jerusalem, on the very land King David pastured sheep when he was a boy. Ezra is the director of the Jewish Heritage Project, which showcases the rise of Jewish life and culture on the land at the cradle of Hebrew civilization, which is Judea and Samaria. Ezra is the author of the book titled Judea and Samaria, the Land of God. He has visited over 120 Jewish communities in Judea and Samaria, or also known as the West Bank. Are you with us now? Exactly. He has made movies to document Jewish life on the land, and some have been screened on Jewish Live TV in America, as well as he has spoken on radio. And you can also see some of his work on YouTube. Ezra, welcome to Borderlines.
Well, thank you so much. It's a great honor to be on your show on Borderline and to be able to share whatever you want me to share, and it's very exciting for me. I didn't expect it, but I got your email, and now we're here together, and I'm so happy.
Well, a digital welcome to Nigeria is what I should actually say, because is this your first time on Nigerian radio?
Yes, it is. The last time I had an encounter with Nigeria was I was at a hotel about 8 years ago in Jerusalem, and there was a tour group that literally from Nigeria that literally booked up all the rooms in the hotel, and everybody was talking to me. They were very friendly, and it was I thought, wow, the people in Nigeria, they're very friendly.
That's what Nigerians do. Yeah, in fact, incidentally, Nigeria sends the highest number of pilgrims to
Really?
Jerusalem, yes, abroad. So you will be able to call. Let me just read out the phone numbers, because I tell you what, Ezra, we have very active listeners. You will get to understand why. 0201-277-0993, 0201-277-1993, 277-2993. 277-3993. And you know how we do on Borderlines? You can send your message and comments whilst I'm in conversation with Ezra, because he is my guest first before you all get to ask him questions. Send your WhatsApp messages, comments, and questions to 0809-597-5805. We are streaming live on Facebook and on YouTube, Nigeria Info 99.3. Go on, subscribe, and you will find Borderlines. Let's get started. So first and foremost, tell us, what is the Jewish Heritage Project all about?
Well, the Jewish Heritage Project seeks to document the rise of Jewish life and culture on the land of the cradle Hebrew civilization. So the covenant that God made with our father Abraham, basically about 700 years ago, was a land covenant in which it was the covenant of circumcision, and that the sign of the covenant was circumcision, and it was came with a promise that one day the people of Israel would inherit this land, and that covenant was made in Judea and Samaria, and for 3,700 years the Jewish people, the people of Israel, have been observing that covenant under the premise that one day we will return to that land and build a kingdom that will be a blessing to all the world. And of course, it's been a long journey. And in 1967, we came back into the land that was promised to us, that's central to our identity. But all of Israel, including Tel Aviv, is part of our land. But our Hebrew civilization, like if you read the Bible, basically for the most part, was played out on this land, and all the promises and covenants. And now we're back in the land, and because since 67, there was a lot of negative press, as we all know, about Jews settling on the land, and there was a lot of Jews were being attacked and stuff, and all the stuff we were dealing with in those days has been a struggle since day one, since 48, but even before. But I thought the people of Israel, they need to get the truth of what is Jewish life. It's not illegal settlers in little outposts that are toting guns, scaring Arabs, but there's beautiful Jewish communities that are blossoming on the very land and from which we were born. So communities like that were in the Bible, like Shiloh and Beit El and Ophrah and Kiryat Arba and Tekoa and many others that existed in ancient days since the days of Joshua, have now been reborn on the very land from which they were first established. And this is the fulfillment of a prophecy in which God said, I will rebuild you again as at first. So it's like these little communities that were, condemned as, illegal are suddenly blossoming flowers, testimonies of the faithfulness of the God of Israel, that he was bringing his children back to the land he promised to give to them. And now these communities are beginning to be born, and they're blossoming despite all the incredible struggles that are going on. And so I thought I want to show the Jewish world and the entire world what is really happening, because there's so much negative press that nobody really understands. So at the JewishHeritageProject.com website, people can go and see the fulfillment of the biblical prophecies before their eyes and see the beautiful cultures that's developing on this land. And all from a positive viewpoint. It's not negative, it's all positive, to share with the world the goodness of God in that he's being faithful.
Okay. Wonderful.
And,
you mentioned covenants. Let's talk about that covenant, that promise that you said was made. So I'm presuming you're talking about Abraham, right?
yes,
Right.
exactly.
So let's start, if you could just kind of take 3 minutes. Let's talk about Abraham. What do you mean by that covenant? That covenant, was that promise made to just Jews, or was it made to all descendants of Abraham?
it was meant it was meant to the descendants of Abraham through Isaac and Jacob. So when God made the covenant, after God said to Abraham, go to the land in which I will show you, and Abraham came into the land, which was then called Canaan, eventually became called Israel. God made a covenant with him because of his faithfulness in taking the journey, him and his wife Sarah. And so Sarah gave birth to a son named Isaac, and God said that the covenant would be established through Isaac. And then he reiterated the promise to Jacob, which was the son of Isaac, who gave birth to the tribes of Israel, 12 sons that became the 12 tribes of Israel. And this is who the Jewish people, and even people that out there in the world that may not even know they have Hebrew roots, because we've been scattered for so many years.
Okay.
But it's covenant for those who are the descendant of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, but with the premise that God says that you will be a blessing to all the nations of the earth. And that is basically our mission. So it's a very difficult one, obviously, but we're working on it, and we...
So here's the thing. Help me out. Abraham married 2 wives. He has Ajara and he has Sarah. Sarah gave birth to Ishmael. Ajara gave birth to Ishmael. Sarah gave birth to Isaac. Isaac gives birth to Esau and Jacob, right? Jacob marries Rachel, who gives birth to the 12 tribes of Israel. But Esau married Mahalath, okay, who is the daughter of Ishmael, right? Mahalath gave birth to Ruel. Okay, so help me understand this. That blessing is effectively to all descendants of Abraham, isn't it?
Well,
if we go even further, if we go by direct theological, if you like, logical descendants, covenant descendants, both Esau and his wife are direct bloods, because on both sides they are direct bloods of Abraham. So my question to you then is, why is it that when, just as you've spoken to me now, you speak of a promise, only of a promise made to Jews, not of a promise made to Esau and Jacob and all descendants of Abraham?
Well, you made a very sharp point and very sharp observation. Well, when Isaac and Ishmael were living in the same house, when actually even before Ishmael was born, when Hagar the Egyptian was pregnant with Abraham's baby, God made a promise that he would be blessed, and that he would be 12 princes, and that he would be a multiple of people. And then, okay, so that's Ishmael. And then after Isaac did marry, when there was a counterpoint between Jacob and Esau, really established by his mother, when Esau was not following the ways of God, and Jacob and Isaac was going to give the blessing. Just to back up just slightly, originally it was meant that both Esau and Jacob carried the banner for God to the world. But Esau did not want to follow God, and Rebekah, the wife of Isaac, when she saw that Isaac was going to give a blessing to Esau, because, well, he just thought that he was the special one because he was a very capable man, very strong, and could, do many things. So, but Jacob was more spiritual, less unaggressive. But God spoke to Rebekah and said that the younger, which was Jacob, would be the prominent one. So what happened is when Esau saw that his parents were not pleased with the women that he had married. He went and married the daughter of Ishmael. So, but Ishmael, remember, had already been sent away with his own blessing, that God would bless his descendants and multiply them, and that they would be great nations. But so afterwards, there was a feud between Esau over the blessing of Isaac, giving it to Jacob, and Esau plotted to kill Jacob, and Jacob fled for his life. And as he fled, God spoke to him in a place called Beit El, which is in the Shamron, Samaria, and said to him that he would be with him, and that he would establish his seed through him, and that the land in which he lies on, that God would give it to him and his descendants. So at that point, it was settled that all the descendants of Jacob would be the inheritance of the land, and the descendants of Ishmael would have their land. And as we understand, the children of Ishmael, let's say the Arab people, and even Muslims in general, but the children of Ishmael, they have a lot of land, a lot more than what the Jewish people have.
Okay.
So God has blessed them with oil, and multiplied them exceedingly. And that was the blessing that God gave to them. Okay. And, at the end of, at the end of Abraham's life, when he passed away, Ishmael and Isaac were together.
Okay.
And they were friends. And this is the ultimate example that God wants, that the Arab people and Muslims, that they will be friends with the people of Israel, and that one day, that's why the Abraham Accords was, I think, the seeds of something great.
Yeah, we're going to talk about the Abraham Accords. Just to get the history, I think you probably meant Esau, not Ishmael. And the problem was between the mothers, not the sons, right? It was the mothers, and it was Jacob's mother that put him up to wearing, the hairy coat. It wasn't between, and of course, as biblical history has it, both sons reconciled, because when Esau went to Abraham and said, okay, what then do you give me? Abraham said, I will give you my blessing, right? So Isaac said, I'll give you my blessing. So now, both sons were blessed, but even more so, what is critical is both sons, they made up later on. They forgave each other, whatever it was, irrespective of what was going on with their mothers, and came together to bury their father, right? So,
yes,
right. So we also have to talk about, the Samaritans, the children of Hebrew and Ishmaelites, right, who are living in Judea and Samaria, which is the West Bank, who also ancestrally mixed with Jews. So before we even get further, the question I've got to ask then is, when we look at settlements, the projects such as the Jewish projects, why then is it exclusive? Is it excluding the other direct descendants? In fact, possibly the immediate direct descendants of Abraham, because your brothers,
just to reiterate again, God established the covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He followed the line, and when Jacob fled from his brother Esau, who was going to kill him, Jacob had a dream, and God visited him in a dream and told him that his descendants would inherit this land. And actually, Isaac did give Esau a blessing, as well he gave Jacob a blessing, but it was a different blessing. But the two cannot be together.
What was the blessing?
It was a more diminished blessing, but he would be the master of the earth, because Esau was a very powerful person and a very capable person, but he was not in tune to spiritual things like his brother Jacob was. So they were very different people. But God gave land to the descendants of Ishmael and the descendants of Esau. Now, in the Bible, when we read it, we find that in later generations, Esau did many bad things in wars against the Jewish kingdom. And God said through the prophets that he would cut up Asaph and his descendants. And that means that there will be no inheritance in the land of Israel for sure. And even the land that he once had, which because he had moved out of the land, he moved to basically what would be southern Jordan today. And that's where his people blossomed and flourished.
Okay.
But they became
basically... Sorry to interrupt you because we're running out of time. What I'm saying is that Abraham blessed his sons, right? So you have two brothers. Now, of course, there's always family feuds, right? Which is granted. But we have to go back to the fact, I have to ask again. Whilst, like you rightly said, the Jews have a right to return to Israel, granted, nobody can argue that. But why must it be at the expense of their brothers, the Palestinians, the Samaritans? Why is it not together? Because what we do know, and you can correct me, is that there were 6% of Jews living in Palestine. Everybody was living happily. But now, over time, it became a sort of pushing out of the Palestinians and more expansion towards the land. So let's go back to, I do want to just close up on that.
I can answer that question.
Abraham blessed both sons. So why can't Jews include Palestinians? Because they are all descendants.
Okay, so just to reiterate, and then I'm going to expand on it to make a clear answer to the question. Again, God made a difference between the brothers, and he specifically mentioned that the land west of the Jordan, even other lands were mentioned, but west of the Jordan would be given to the descendants of Jacob. And that means Ishmael, Esau, they were given land by God. And if we give our land away, that means we're annulling ourselves as a Jewish people, because the covenant of circumcision, which we have practiced for 3,700 years, is established that we would inherit that land. And that was the promise of God. Now, if you want to talk when we had a Hebrew kingdom, the Romans destroyed the temple and kicked the Jews out of the land. For the next 2,000 years, there was never any independent race of people to settle that land. In fact, since Joshua established the Hebrew nation, there's never been any other race of people to settle on this land as an independent race of people, only the people of Israel. So now, let's say up until the Roman times, when they expelled us and destroyed the temple, the land was just foreign occupying powers kept taking turns occupying the land, but there was no race of people. There's never been an Arab nation or civilization independent on this land ever, just that the Jews remained. The reason we still here today in the land, only because for 2,000 years we prayed 3 times a year, 3 times a day to our God, that he would return us to the land because of the promises written in the Jewish prophets that are in the Bible, that God said he would bring us back. So in the 2,000 years, the land for the most part was desolate. And there wasn't, because it was so dry, it couldn't be inhabited. Only in the late 1880s, when the Turks were allowing Jews to come back to the land, but there was never an Arab nation. There was never a Palestinian civilization of Arab people. Palestinians pre-1967 were actually Arabs, Christians, Jews, and whoever else lived here. So there was, they don't have like a legal right. And under the British mandate, this is the most important thing. In 1977, when Britain kicked out the Ottomans, after they ruled the land for 400 years, and they're not Arabs, during that time when the Allied powers of World War I, based on the Jewish connection to the land, said to them in the mandate for Palestine that because of their Hebrew and indigenous connection to the land that they can reconstitute their ancient nation. That means reconstitute a nation that once existed. Meanwhile, all the other Middle Eastern lands were drawn, the sand lines were drawn in the sand, and they received their nations. But the people of Israel, the Jewish people worldwide, were given this land. And during that British mandate, when they were mandated to facilitate Jewish immigration and the establishment of the state in 1922, they delayed it. And by 1939, John Peters, a historian, had documented that over 200,000 Arabs have migrated into the land from all the nations around Israel. The Britain let them migrate because the economy was beginning to grow, and they got jobs, mostly working for Jews. And then, of course, we had the Holocaust, and then we came in 1948. I'm skipping stuff, but in 1948 we were approved as a nation, and Jordan, that was a nation that had only existed for 2 years, in 1946, joined a consortium of nations to destroy the Jewish people, and they captured the heartland of the Jewish people, which is Judea and Samaria. For 19 years they had it, and during that time, hundreds of thousands of more Arabs from Jordan and around migrated there. And today we have, like, at least in Judea and Samaria, there's about 1.5 million. But none of them are the natural inhabitants or the descendants of natural inhabitants, but they are here. Okay. And we're trying to give them not that it's, put it this way, we've had people in Israel that have been trying, whether people agree with it or not, to give them land for peace. And we've only received terror because it's only been a one-way street of terror. It's always been about our existence. So in 47, when they were offered a state, like the partition plan, they outright said no. The General Assembly took it up and said, we'll provide the land for peace because they actually said, because of the violence of the Arab people against the Jews, that they would divide the land, like appeasement to terror. So now it's really a cultural thing. I mean, there's lots of beautiful Arab people and good people, but somehow a culture that the Jewish people, I mean, we're not allowed to exist. So therefore, it's never been about land. It's always been about us living and breathing as we perceive it.
Okay, so let's talk about, you mentioned 1947. So in 1947, the UN adopted that resolution 181, which called for the partition of Palestine into Arab and Jewish states, right? So the UN handed over 55% of the land to Jews, and Arabs were granted 45% of the land, while Jerusalem was declared a separate international territory. So what do you make, going by what you've said now? I'd like your opinion on that resolution. Do you think it was fair?
Well, first of all, I'm going to answer it full. The mandate for Palestine, when it was ratified in 1922, became the international law regarding the land, and it was given to the Jewish people of the world. In 1947, because of the violence that was going on in the land, remember, it was one-sided. Only one people were being attacked. Jews were not doing terror. They decided to partition the land. So, international law of the mandate for Palestine was actually embraced by the UN in 1945 in Article 80 of the UN Charter. But when the partition plan came, it doesn't have the power. A General Assembly vote doesn't have the power to annul already established international law. However, although it's non-binding, it can't replace international law. It can only take effect if the two parties agree. And at that time, the Arabs rejected it. And that means the only international law to this very day that exists regarding the land from the Jordan to the sea, the Mediterranean Sea, is the mandate for Palestine, which was adopted in its fullest by the UN in Article 80 of the UN Charter. So we can talk about our religious rights, and we do. That's what we're clinging to. But the international legal rights are also with the Jews. They're historical indigenous rights. Even on that site, we're the only independent race of people to live in that land as an independent race in the last 3,500 years.
Okay, so are you then saying that, in your opinion, Resolution 181, the way it was divided, 55 to as Israel, they've given to the Jewish, and 45 Palestinians, with 5% Jerusalem being kept as a neutral state that was actually supposed to be managed or administered under UN administration. Are you saying that resolution, you agree with it? Because
I'm not saying I agree with it. No, I don't agree with it, but nevertheless, because I believe that God gave us the land, but nevertheless, it became the resolution became completely irrelevant when the Arabs decided they did not want a state beside the Jews. And in 1948, the Consortium of Arab Nations invaded Israel to exterminate the Jewish people. Okay. And they didn't succeed. Instead of making peace, they chose war, and we lost 6,000 people in that war. And it's been a struggle ever since.
Well, over 750,000. Some even argue that it's now 1.2 million Palestinians were kicked out of the land, with several thousands.
700,000 Jews were kicked out of Middle Eastern lands and came to Israel. So it was like even. Okay,
but you have the likes of Israeli historians who said no, they came to get us. I was quite happy. I forgot. I think it's Avi Shleim who said, I was quite happy. We were living in Iraq and we were fine. Nothing was wrong with us. But they came to get us, that we should all move back to Israel. And anyway, let's move on. What I want to talk about is Jerusalem, right? Because it features a lot in your film. And I did watch your films yesterday and the day before that. And we'll get a chance to talk about that, because I know my listeners are going to want to call in and ask questions. So let's talk about Jerusalem. The city of Jerusalem is currently divided between West Jerusalem, which is predominantly Jewish, and East Jerusalem, which is majority Palestinian. Israel captured East Jerusalem after that 6-day war in 1967 along with West Bank, right? Now, that is a step that has not been recognized by the international community. Does Israel want the whole of Palestine? Because you have said several times on this show so far, the land belongs to us. We were given the land. It was promised to us by God. So, are you saying Israel or the Jewish people are entitled to all of the land and the Palestinians shouldn't be there?
Well, yes, absolutely. For instance, if you take Silwan in East Jerusalem, there's probably 80 or 100,000 Arab people there. When did they get there? Well, in 1912, there was a Jewish community, a Yemenite community, on the hills of Silwan, 144 families. And if you see the pictures, there were no Arabs living there. They all came. They began to come in under the British mandate. And in 1935, Britain expelled the Jews from the hills of, we call it Shiloah, but Silwan, it wasn't called Silwan then, because of the violence against them. They said, for your own protection, we're expelling you, but when everything settles down, you can return. Of course, that never happened. And then Jordan joined the Consortium of Nations to attack us, and more came in. So none of them are natural inhabitants. But as for the Jews, we made it the capital of Israel 3,000 years ago under King David, and we've been praying 3 times a day for 2,000 years to return it. Like when Romans kicked us out, we didn't relinquish ownership of the land, because if we said, okay, we've been defeated, we're going our own way, maybe there would be a good argument there. But we didn't. We clung to God. We clung praying, say it's our land, we're going to return to it. And the Bible, the most printed book on the planet Earth, I heard someone say there's 2.5 billion copies, is a testimony of the Jewish history of the land and its Jewish capital of Jerusalem. So no one can say they don't know that Jerusalem is not the capital of the Jewish people. In fact, the whole world knows historically. Okay. That's why branches of archaeology only have biblical archaeology. There's no such thing as like Palestinian archaeology, because there never was a Palestinian civilization. And
there
so the
Palestinian civilization?
There never was one.
Are
no.
you saying there wasn't a Palestinian economy? There wasn't a Palestinian society? There wasn't Palestinian food? There wasn't Palestinian culture? Palestinian dance? Incidentally, what is curious is the similarities between both Jewish culture and Palestinian culture. The bread culture, the dance, the way you dance, even the way the Hebrew is written, and the way Arabic is written. Are you saying there wasn't a Palestinian culture, civilization? Because without a civilization, you can't have a culture.
Okay, I'll answer that. In the land of Palestine, which really received its name from the Romans because they knew that the ancient enemy of the Jewish people were the Philistines, so they changed the name to Syria Palestina. So that was the name. So the people living in the land called Palestine, named by the Romans, 2,000 or 1,800 years ago, whenever, that anyone living there were called Palestinian. That means there were Palestinian passports during the British Mandate that they were Jews, Christians, they were everybody. The Palestinian Post, which became the Jerusalem Post, was a Jewish newspaper. The Palestinian Philharmonic was a Jewish orchestra. So there was a Palestinian culture of all the mixed cultures that had migrated into the land during the Ottomans and even before, but there was never a large amount of people that migrated to the land because the land was so desolate. So Mark Twain wrote a witness in 1897 that he had passed through the land and he traveled for days without even seeing a human being because the land was almost uninhabitable. But it was a Turks ruled it for 400 years before the British came. So any Palestinian culture was a mix of different peoples, including Turks and Jews. The Jews, there was always a remnant of Jews that clung to Jerusalem. And there was, Greek Orthodox, Catholics, Armenians, the whole Armenian quarter in Jerusalem right now. So it's never been.
Because we're running out of time. I have to cut in there because we're running out of time.
Yeah.
Again, I hate to go back to this, but
that's okay.
You have said, you have at least agreed that they are all descendants of Abraham, and now you're saying Palestinians should not be on that land. The whole of the land should be for Israel. However, here's the thing. Judaism, Jews are supposed to be the light of the world. So if you're supposed to be the light of the world, why then are you not extending that light onto your brother Palestinians?
Well,
I'm going to have to rush you because we're running out of time.
Okay, so be a light to the world would be following God. If we give the land, let's say we gave Judea and Samaria away, the heartland, then we would be formally nullifying the covenant that God made with Abraham.
Okay, so what you're saying is God wouldn't want the Palestinians where you are, wouldn't want.
That's right. If we gave our land away, then we'd be annulling the land covenant that we made with Abraham.
But Ezra, the Samaritans mixed with the Jews. So why wouldn't God want them there? I don't understand. But we've got to move on. We're running out of time.
There's a dynamic playing here.
Okay. If you could do it in a minute.
They don't want us alive. They've been killing us. There's a culture, and the world's been trying to pressure Israel to surrender land. And we've done a lot of concessions, but we only get terror.
Okay.
We don't have terror in the culture. We're peaceful people, and many of our people have been trying to give the land away just because they don't know what else to do to try to get peace. But the truth is, like in an old Jewish saying, if you show mercy to those who do you wicked, you end up showing yourself wicked to the merciful. So when you give them land in 2000, from 2000 to 2004, first 1,400 civilians were murdered and 7,000 wounded because we gave self-rule to them.
You're even saying that they don't even deserve self-rule. You talk about the Jewish.
I would say that.
Okay, so let's go back to something. If you say
I think the answer is.
Yeah, go on. Let me let you finish your sentence before I move.
First of all, the Arab people are children of Abraham. They have an exalted status among people of the whole world.
They are not children of Abraham?
And God has blessed them, yes, the children of Abraham, and they have an exalted status because of Abraham is their forefather, the beginning, just like the Jews. And God blessed them with an enormous amount of land. And I believe that if for the sake of the dignity, because really, no self-respecting Arab wants to live in a state, seeing the Israeli flag and hearing Hatifa. They want to live in their own land and under their own culture, because the two don't mix. So if the world would unite for the sake of peace and bless the Arab people who live here and give them an offering that they could migrate to the lands, which remember, that most of these people, most of the Arabs in recent years, especially in Judea and Samaria, migrated from Arab countries. If the world would unite and spend all the money they did in trying to create a state to help them migrate back into their lands and bless them and create cities and towns, that would be peace. That would be peace, I think.
Okay, I've got to interrupt you because we're running out of time. Right. If you could answer this in a minute. So, where would you like the Palestinians to go, since you don't want them?
I want the Jewish people to inherit their land, the people of Israel, and I want peace.
All of
for
that.
I want peace for them, but because it becomes very evident that it's not possible since 1929, when the Jewish community of heaven was massacred to death by the local Arabs.
But if I may interrupt you. Go on.
The two cultures cannot live together. Okay. So if we bless them and say, why don't you migrate back to the lands where you came from? Then the world will unite and bless you and help you and bless them. And God will bless them because they are the children of Abraham. But together, because the cultures are so different, and we want peace. But if they didn't give us peace, we are trying to give them land. What are we supposed to do as Jews? We want to live in peace.
Okay, so the Palestinians will tell you they want to live in peace. The Palestinians will tell you that they were not the ones who were actually anti-Semitic, right? It was the Europeans who were anti-Semitic. It's as a result of European anti-Semitism that we actually find that the Jews were discriminated against, were persecuted. It wasn't the Palestinians. So we have to actually respect history where facts exist. Let's now go back to, I'd like to talk about the Jewish project now. Let's talk about one of the things, when I watched your film yesterday, I can't remember which one. I think it might be the third one. I'm trying to remember the title now. The first gentleman that you interviewed on there, who talked about, I think it was 1974, the first settlement, he said something which I found quite striking. He said when they had the desire to begin to create settlements, etc., they then reached out to somebody, I'm paraphrasing, I can't remember the name. They reached out to somebody to help them reach out to the government of Israel to seek permission for them to actually get the land. He then said the response he got was that Zionism commands you to actually claim the land first and seek permission later. Talk to us about, if you can say in 1 minute, because honestly, I wish we had 2 hours.
Well,
what is Zionism? What is Zionism? If you can give it to us in a minute.
Well,
explain Zionism to us.
Okay, so you uncovered that there's two aspects. There's Jewish people who are not so religious, and they just want to settle the land, plant in the land, and that's the Zionism created by Herzl. Now, religious people come to the land, and they say in 1967, the heartland, that the 2,000 years of prayer are answered, that God gives back. So they call it religious Zionism, and that we have to continue the work started by the early settlers, like from the days, like in the late 1800s and early 1900s, just continue the settlement of the land, not kill the Arabs, just establish settlements because God gave it. And that's all that really is. But there is like 2 camps right now, and one is religious, and some are not are religious, and some are in between.
Okay,
and
so what you're saying is religious Zionism is different to political Zionism.
Well, yeah, I would say that it's slowly merging, but the truth is, the settlement of Judea and Samaria was a religious motivation, where the early state of Israel was not necessarily a religious motivation. They migrated the land from Russia because of pogroms in Europe.
Okay.
And they went to the historical land, which they were historically, and that's...
Okay, so religious Zionism then, am I correct if I say religious Zionism is aligned or intertwined with Jewish values? Is that correct?
Yes.
Right, okay. Jewish values, as far as I know, and I grew up in England, in Northwest London. As you know, if you know Northwest London, you know where I was surrounded by Jews all over. Golders Green, Finchley, Hendon, you name it. Edgware, and stuff. I even worked part-time in an estate agent, actually, for, a Jewish family. So, Stanmore, the whole area. What I know of Jewish Zionism, of Jewish values rather, is that it's all embracing. It doesn't exclude anybody. It's inviting, it's embracing, it's community-based, it's friendship-based, it's love-based. Now, if religious Zionism is interwoven or is the same as Jewish values, why then, again, is it exclusion of another? Because what I know of political Zionism is that political Zionism is an exclusion of others. Jewish values is not an exclusion of others. Now, at this point, I want to ask you about the Hilltop Youth. Do you align with the Hilltop Youth?
I align with people that are good, that are Jewish.
Okay, and the Hilltop Youth good.
That want to love the land. So there are Hilltop Youths, and they get a bad name, but unjustly, because they don't persecute Arabs, but they do cling to the hilltops because of their religious motivation.
I have to come in there. The Hilltop Youth are on record. There are videos of them actually going into Palestinians' homes and actually attacking them. Even they're so fearful that even it is said that the government is afraid of them. Now again, I go back to the Jewish values that I know, that I grew up with. The Jewish value that's all embracing, which is not what we see from the Hilltop Youth. And if you align with them for the Jewish project, is not what.
The Jewish Heritage Project. The Jewish Heritage Project is about bringing truth, and so I'm going to tell you the truth. There is no culture in Judea and Samaria, whether you call them Hilltop Youth or you call them anything else. There's no culture to persecute Arabs. There's only one culture that produces violence, and it's one-way street. And 99.99% of all violence is directed toward Jews, and there's no culture. That's why the Jewish Heritage Project brings forth this idea and this truth that there's not a culture. Jewish values don't have that, but God gave us the land. And guess what will happen if the Jews have the land? We have a prototype. In the days of King Solomon, when the Hebrew kingdom was at its fullest, at its zenith, it said all the kingdoms and the kings of the world sought the presence of Solomon, and he shared the knowledge of God with them. And it says in the last days, when the Jews come back, and God promised it, that all the Hebrews will come back to the land, to rebuild the temple. And it says all the nations of the world will come to God, and his house is a house of prayer for all nations. But the Jewish people are the ones that build the house, and they allow the nations of the world. So we want the world to believe in God just like us, in the same way that God is a God of love. He does love us, but he can't set up his kingdom if the Jewish people are not allowed to return to their land. And it's a process, obviously, but that's what it's all about, us creating a holy nation to bless the rest of the world so they can all approach God.
So you want to bless the rest of the world, but you would rather the Palestinians.
We can't surrender our nation and do the mission. If we surrender our land,
what I'm saying is,
God, we don't want to do it anymore.
Okay, so you would like to bless the rest of the world as long as the Palestinians are out of the way. You can call now. I can take two calls maximum, maybe 3, because we've only got 7 minutes left on the show. So if you want to call, you can call now. But because the call, Ezra, answer me this: you want to bless the rest of the world, but you want you justify the murdering of Palestinians or the expulsion of Palestinians.
Well, no, I didn't say anything. I said that it would be great if the Palestinians come to believe in the way that Jews believe and desire peace as a culture.
Okay.
As a culture.
But the Palestinians will tell you.
We're creating the image of God.
Okay.
And if you don't want to live with Jews, then why not, let's say, help them go and settle in a place where they can live with their own people and be blessed by God.
Okay.
We just want to establish the mission and settle the land that God gave us, just as God gave them all kinds of land. But if we take the only place, the homeland that we have for the Jewish people, and we create an Arab nation in the heartland, and we reduce ourselves to a nation like 12 kilometers wide, we won't exist. We will come to an end, and there will be no light to the world. There will be no Hebrew nation.
Okay.
So we have a right to our own land.
The lines have gone crazy. I knew they would have questions for you, and we've only got 6 minutes left. I'm so sorry. We should have booked you for 2 hours. Right. Hello. Okay. I'm coming to the next line. Make sure you just say your name, where you're calling from, and your question now. Question. Your name, your question, please, quickly.
Yeah, this is the merchant man. My question is, who was occupying the land where we call the present Israel?
But we've already spoken about that, merchant man. I'm sorry.
No, it's based on the biblical account he's given, because
yes, it has. That's what I'm saying. He's already answered that. I've got to answer.
His assertion based on their account. They don't believe in Jesus now, but he's using biblical accounts to back up his historical.
So, what is your question? You're asking.
The question is prior to 1948 war. Where was the present Israel created as a territory? That's
Thank
my
you.
question.
Thank you, merchant man. I'll wait. Just give me a second, Israel. Hello.
It's okay. I greet you.
Good afternoon. Your name, where you're calling from, and your question, please.
Yeah, my name is Rapuchku.
Question, please, Rapuchku.
I greet your guest, Ezra. Okay, my question is this: with these points of your guest stated, what then did Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu want from Palestine, or rather Hamas, to get rid of them, or what, before he agrees to ceasefire? Okay,
thank you. Hello, the last one I'm going to take. Hello?
Hello, good evening.
Good evening.
It's like want the man to speak your mind. Is that so?
We need you to ask your question. I don't have time for this, I'm afraid. Hello? Okay. Right. The last question I'm going to take. Hello?
Yeah, good afternoon, Sisiogi.
Good afternoon. What's your name? Where you calling from? Your question, please.
You have Emmanuel on the line. I'm calling you from Ekwe.
Go ahead, Emmanuel.
Yeah, he claimed God has given them the land. If God gives them the land, do they need guns and bombs and explosives to defend the land?
Thank you.
Won't God give them the land fairly?
Okay, thank you.
Bloodshed? Number two.
Oh, quick, you're only allowed one question. Go on.
Yeah, number two. Democratic Republic of Congo seems to be the most blessed nation on the face of the earth. If their God was not blind, which God has given them that country, that is flowing with milk and honey with a lot of natural resources?
Thank you. Right, okay. I'm going to let you answer those three, whichever one you picked up. I'm going to give you 2 minutes because the lines have gone crazy and we're running out of... We've literally got 3 minutes left. Well, what he was saying is, if God gave you the land, the last question, if God gave you the land, did he give you the land to claim? Why don't you need to claim it back with guns and ammunitions and war?
Well, the big thing is that we didn't claim it back with guns and ammunition. We claimed that because of our belief in God, we prayed for 2,000 years to return to the land. And then after World War I, the Allied powers got together in San Remo and said, because of the historical connection of the Jewish people with the land, they have a right to reconstitute their nation on that land. So that means the world agreed at that time that we lived on that land as a nation, and now that we could reconstitute it, so then we began to establish a nation in 48. We didn't fire any guns. The only guns that were fired were in 1948, we were attacked by 6 armies, and they had a confessed mission to exterminate us, like Hitler, and we defended ourselves. and we lost 6,000 lives. And we were given the land, we didn't acquire it through guns. The world made the decision that we were the historical inheritors of the land.
Okay.
And
well, the world made that decision. We must not forget again that there was a lot of lobbying going on way before that by early Zionist leaders. So we mustn't forget that. But anyway, let me come back to that other question, which I think is a really important question, which I think you'd like to answer. And if you could answer it in about a minute. What does Israel want before it agrees to a ceasefire?
That's a political question, because I don't even know what goes on in the offices. It's been a very difficult question because obviously we don't want Jews to die, and Hamas has a covenant calling for the genocide of the Jewish people. October 7th, they tried to carry it out. They did a horribly good job, and they want to continue it. They confess they're going to continue it. So if they exist, that means we approve of an existence of an entity that has sworn to exterminate us. So we do have some self-respect and dignity as a people. We don't want to die. We want to live in peace.
Okay,
and they confess they want us to die.
Okay. The Palestinians said they want to live in peace. They want their own sovereignty. You don't want them there. Where would you like the Palestinians to go? If you could answer that in 30 seconds.
I would say that if they don't want to live in peace with the Arab people...
No, I said they say they want to live in peace, and they say they want their own sovereignty. You don't want to give them their own sovereignty, and you think they should...
I will say this. We still, in the end, have to cling to the God of Israel, the God of the world, the God who created all of us here on the show, all the listeners, in the image of God. He is the master of the universe. If he gave us land, then we have a right to say that we want the land is for the people of Israel. Just like he gave the descendants of Ishmael land, he gave the people of Israel land, and we want to live on this land in peace.
Okay.
And we want to occupy it with all the people of the world.
So where should they go? Where should Palestinians go?
Well, since in recent, in the last 120 years, most, not all, of the Arab people throughout Judea and Samaria and large parts of Israel migrated into the land from Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Arabia.
Go? Because I've got to go.
If they migrate back and we help them, we bless them, because I can understand they're born here. It's all we ever known. Okay. I can understand that. They need a dignity and self-respect. But it's hard two cultures live together that are different.
Thank you. Thanks, Ezra. We've got to have you back because we still have so much to cover. Is that all right? Will you come back? Will you come back?
Yes, for sure.
Oh, it's been wonderful talking to you. God bless you, and have a wonderful weekend. Thank you for being a guest on Borderlines.
All the best. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Lagos is now time. Nigeria, it's now time for the 5 o'clock news. Yvonne is in the studio.
99.3 Nigeria Info. We are more than just radio. Subscribe to our YouTube channel at Nigeria Info FM. Check us out on Facebook at Nigeria Info 99.3. Follow us on Twitter at Nigeria Info FM and on Instagram at Nigeria Info FM Lagos for live updates as it happens. 99.3 Nigeria Info. Let's talk.